All right, welcome to Points on the Podcast. I am Elias Schuster. As always, I am joined by Matt Rooney. And Matt, we are on the first day here of the in-season tournament. We're coming to
So
you on
excited.
a historic day. A historic day.
November Madness.
Yeah, November Madness is upon us. It's a historic day in the NBA. I'm just going to try to say the word historic a million times on this show because then maybe we want to please the NBA. Maybe they'll come to us.
It's gonna
They'll
day
want to.
we're gonna tell our grandkids about. Where were you
Yeah,
when you watched the Bulls' first in-season tournament game?
when you watch the first of 4 in-season tournament games. Yes, that's what it is, right? Today is they play the Brooklyn Nets at the United Center. As of recording, so this is November 3rd. I don't know when you'll be listening to this. We'll try not to talk too much about the Nets, considering people might listen to this weekend, and we want to talk about a little bit more than just that. But to start the show, it only makes sense for us to touch a little bit on this in-season tournament. All 7 games around the NBA this season, or not this season, tonight, I should say, are going to be in-season tournament games. So that includes some pretty intriguing matchups overall. I feel like the groups that they created are pretty solid. The Bulls, I would say, are in a rather advantageous group for them. But the 7 games on the slate tonight are Cavaliers, Pacers, Knicks, Bucks, Warriors, Thunder, Nets, Bulls, Wizards, Heat, Grizzlies, Trailblazers, Mavericks, and Nuggets. So all those games, even if you listen to this later and you go back, those were all considered in-season tournament games. And a rundown of what that means is each team in the entire NBA put into groups. Um, and those groups are made up of 5 teams. They will each play each other once. And by the end of this stage, which will basically be the end of November, the 8 total teams will move on to the knockout round. And those are the 6 winners of each group in each conference. And then a wild
It's a
card team.
wild card team from each side, right?
Yeah, so hopefully that made some sense. But you can go look up the rules if not. It's probably going to be a little confusing, I will say, for a lot of casual fans to see this, and for us, we've never seen it before, right? So we'll have to see how it plays out and exactly how all the logistics work. And the NBA is hoping that it brings a little bit more of an intense environment to begin the season, and because this is a time of year where a lot of fans struggle to get involved, to get interested in NBA action. And I think the league is hoping, hey, there's football on, there's the World Series just ended, but this is a time of year that's a little hard for the NBA to grasp onto. And so they're hoping that this in-season tournament will increase the level of play. And Matt, I definitely have questions about whether that'll be the case. I don't know about you, but I'm not as high on something like this as the play-in tournament, where the stakes are the playoffs. The stakes here are just an extra paycheck.
The first night of this will probably be fun for like us watching the Bulls or people watching their teams, but I feel like these, especially the round robin games, will become not special attractions very, very quickly. And like, I don't know, there's just the play-in tournament trophy that really means nothing outside of some money when the players win just doesn't really do it for me. Like I
Yeah.
don't get like it just I get that they're trying to make these in-season games more important, but like they're already regular season games. They should be more important. Like I don't think
Yeah.
because Kawhi doesn't want to play on a regular Tuesday in November against the Grizzlies or whoever it might be, doesn't mean because it's an in-season tournament game that he's like, oh, you know what, I should play this one. Like, no, I think he'll probably still just like do what he normally does and be on his minutes limits, and that speaks for a lot of people. So I don't know. It's like it's fun. I'll watch tonight. I'll see the red court that'll probably hurt my eyes, but also look kind of cool. But I think in the long run, it's
Well,
like
I want to ask you. I want to ask you about that. What do you think about this? The Chicago Bulls, if anyone missed it, and every team around the NBA have unveiled a in-season tournament court. So each team will host only 2 games at home. So for those 2 games, however, the Bulls will have a special new court. We've never seen anything like it in the league before. It'll be a different colored court. It will be all red with the Bulls logo in kind of black and white in the middle.
it's
And
interesting.
yeah, I'm not about it. I don't know. I guess I should say I like the fact that this team, not the team, the league is clearly trying to make it seem like a big deal,
Yeah,
right? They want to make it seem different. They want to make it seem fun. But I don't know. It's just like we talk about, the stakes don't necessarily seem high enough for me. And the red court is a little bit on TV. I can't see it coming up well.
I don't know how this would work, but like I feel like in order to make it matter, especially for like Bulls fans or like teams that aren't fans of, the Nuggets or the Bucks or like the Celtics, like make this worth some sort of playoff berth. Whether that's like you win the
Yeah.
in-season tournament, you're guaranteed at least a spot in the play-in tournament, or like win the in-season tournament, you're guaranteed the 7 or the 8 seed if you fall behind there. Like make this worth something more than just an extra
I
paycheck.
think that's for me. Yeah, for me, if because I think a lot of people also throw out, especially before this was officially announced and the idea was just floated around. People were like, "Well, it should be for draft compensation," and I'm like, "No, players are not going to play for their
Players won't
replacement."
care.
Yeah, players aren't going to play for a possible replacement. So they, if anything, they're going to try to tank their chances then. So the money, which I don't have it in front of me. I think maybe one of them, I have a million tabs up on my computer, so maybe one of them has it. But the money for me is not for a lot of these star level talent, which is what you would hope in these in-season tournaments really, rise to the occasion. Like they're one going to want to reserve themselves for the playoffs, but two, it's not like this money is enough to really get them going. So the only hope would be, that the younger players who this money makes a little bit of a difference to, you're really gonna give this your all, and maybe those young players are those young teams, Orlando, um, the Magic, I think could be a prime example of a team that might do well in this.
Yeah.
But even a team like Portland, they might be playing a little bit harder in these situations, even though Portland's looked pretty bad to start the year. But there's just there's some of these younger guys that I think might try to play hard, and then maybe that gives a sense of just an overall sense of greater competitiveness. But for me, it's hard to see that coming to fruition. But the red court is they're making it seem like a big deal. I'm curious to see what the red court looks like, and I'm also curious these city edition jerseys for Chicago and around the league.
They've grown on me. The Bulls ones have grown on me. When they first came out,
Really?
I didn't like them. They're starting to grow on me a little bit.
Okay,
I'll
I'm
need
not a
I'll
fan,
need to see
but
them. I'll need to see them in person, or not in
Yeah.
person, but like I'll need to see them on the players playing. But they have started to grow on me a touch.
I will say this: I think they'll bounce tonight because of that red court. I think they'll, because they're going to wear them for this in-season tournament game. So I think that black on the red contrast will
look
work
nice.
out. But
The orange
I'm
ball
not a
will
huge,
not. The orange ball is not
No,
going to work
it's gonna
well with
look
the red court.
Yeah, it's going to look a little bit ugly. So
Kind of gross.
anyway, for the in-season tournament, you have Nets tonight, like we said. On this is November 3rd, a Friday. They will be playing Brooklyn, and then other than that, after Brooklyn, they're the other members of their group, which I believe is considered Group C. They will play the Orlando Magic on November 17th. That will be an in-season tournament game. Then the Raptors on November 24th, and then finish their group stage play round with the Boston Celtics on November 28th. So
that'll go well.
All over, yeah, that'll go great. So all coming up here over this next month, and then the knockout stage will begin in December. And those knockout games are single elimination, also continue to count toward the regular season. Those will be continue to be at home arenas. But then when you get to the final four, those final four teams, I believe, are the ones who will head to Vegas and compete. So I think unless they do all, or maybe they do 8, but I think it's just going to be the final.
I think it's the final 4. I believe you're right. I did a post on this way back when they announced it. I'm pretty sure it's the final 4.
It's a lot of logistics, and we'll see it play out. And I think it should be, like you said, I think the first time around might be very exciting, and then after that, I can see it
just being a
down
normal
because
game.
Players realize what it is, and they're like, okay, it's it is what it is. All right, focusing on the Chicago Bulls here, I think I wanted to talk a little bit about first the identity of this team. We're 5 games into the season, maybe not the largest sample size, but let's remember that this isn't 5 games. This is year 3. These are many games. This is the same core, the same group together. So we're trying to
what's
figure
82 times 2 plus 5? 164, 169. This is game 1. There were 169 games into it with this core.
Right. And there was a lot of injury trouble that first season, and then so that's why there was a little bit of excuse coming into year 2, about okay, well there was the Lonzo situation, but also Zach had his knee problems and whatever. And so last year you finally had everybody fully healthy, a stat that I always turn back to. DeRozan, Levine, Vucevic, that 3-man combination played more minutes together than any other 3-man combination in the league. So they had plenty of experience playing together last year. And now you come into this year, copy and paste the roster, basically 5 games in, you're 2-3. And I wouldn't consider the beginning of this schedule, at least these first 5 games, it gets a little harder going on, to be the toughest. So, you're supposed to have some sort of identity at this point when you're this many years into it, as well as when you are this many games into the season. Even you're supposed to see a little bit of it coming out. So I think for me, I definitely do see a little bit of something. I don't know for you, Matt, but identity-wise, looking on both sides of the ball, we can start maybe defensively. But I do think what we saw against Dallas, against Luka Doncic, and in particular, what they were able to bring, that was definitely their best defensive performance of the season, I think, just because of their ability to take him out of it. I know that I shouldn't say out of it entirely, obviously, but they held him.
They limited him to by far his least amount of points, right? He was only 18, I think, on the other night.
Yeah, he came into the game averaging 39 points per game over his first few games of the season, and he just had 18 points, 10 assists, and 7 rebounds. So I know that's still a pretty good game, but it's Luka. So for Luka, it wasn't. And he also shot just 5 of 16 from the field, which is what really stood out, and 1 of 8 from 3-point range. So while at the end of that game, he was still able to pick the Bulls apart, find some shooters, and credit to the Mavs because those role players knocked down the 3-pointers that they needed to knock down. But defensively, at least, the Bulls really kind of gave Luka some trouble. And I think what it showed us throughout that game, just through the many different styles of defense that Billy Donovan threw out there, because it wasn't just one thing. I mean, we saw them start by switching pick and roll. Then we saw them go to blitzing off the pick and roll in the second quarter. They always said they consistently sent 2 guys at Luka, which started to give him trouble. And then the moment he started to figure that out and find, somebody in the open floor or somebody in the middle of the court to get the ball out fast to him and get an open shot, the Bulls adjusted again to then, going back to more just late help on Luka, always sending 2 guys. And then we just saw multiple players face him try to take him one-on-one. We saw Torrey Craig do it. Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White had a couple possessions there, and Alex Caruso, obviously. So they just threw a lot at him. And what I think the game was a good example of was just this team, it does have a lot of defensive talent. And even more than last year, because of an addition of Javon Carter and Torrey Craig, 2 smart veterans, they can also run some of these more aggressive defensive schemes for little spurts in the game without completely sinking the ship. So I don't know for you, Matt, like if you were encouraged by that defensive performance, but for me, I think it was just a reminder no, they finished top 5 in defense last year. They had 2 above average defenders in Torrey Craig and Javon Carter. If as long as they're willing to embrace the physicality and play hard, like this is a team that should be a good defense as the year goes on.
Yeah, it's encouraging anytime you hold. I shouldn't say stop Luka because you didn't stop Luka, but no. you tell me before the game that Luka's going to get held to 18, whatever and whatever. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like especially with how well he's been playing. I'm like, cool. Like the Bulls probably won, but obviously they did not win.
And the 3-point disparity is the big
and that's that's what it comes down to. Is like, am I encouraged by their defense? I guess, but like also this is like kind of what you said, like kind of what it should look like. It's not like it's like asking for a reward for knowing that 2 + 2 = 4. It's like, no, like this defense was this good last year, and then you went, like you said, added 2+ defenders. Like it's good, yeah, but like you're doing what you should be doing. What it comes back down to is offensively, we're saying it here. Do the Bulls have an identity? No, they don't have an identity. Their identity is hopefully Zach, Vooch, or DeMar can figure something out. And what it comes down to again is that we'll probably get to some point where someone in the front office is going to say the word Lonzo and how this was all supposed to work because of him, similar to how the old front office used to say, well, Derek, and now he's not here. But I don't know. Like, I like Kobe White a lot, but you and I both expressed concern, and I've already just flipped this completely from defense to offense now.
Well, we can get into
it. That's where I'm going to get at, because like the defense is fine. The defense is, I shouldn't say fine. It's good. They're a good defensive.
And I should say they're only 20. They have only the 21st defensive rating right now. So I know that statistically it's not looking great, but at the end of the day, like I have more optimism when we're talking about an identity and like building.
And quite out, like they played well against. yeah, they played well against Dallas. They played well against Toronto. They played well against Indiana on the defensive side of things. So like, that is going to be fine. But it comes down to offensively. It's like, all right, Lonzo's out, so and not going to be playing this year. So you decide, and I think extending Kobe White, especially that contract, was a great idea. But you decide to, instead of going out and getting I guess Javon Carter might be the Lonzo-like replacement. Then why isn't he the one starting? Why isn't he the one running the unit? Because you got Lonzo Ball to run that unit and be the maestro, to set up everything, to organize everything, to get everything moving. Then why are you trying to shoehorn a point guard who's not a true prototypical floor general type point guard and Kobe White into that role? Why are you trying to do that when he thrived in the second unit last year? He played his best basketball of his career over the last 20 to 30 games last year running that second unit. Why do you continuously throw Patrick Williams on? I know 5 games into the season, but he just had a second scoreless night of a 5-game season in a starting lineup. Why aren't you putting in a guy like Torrey Craig, who plays good defense, who shoots threes, who grabs rebounds, who is exactly what that first unit is missing?
Right.
Why is he not consistently getting those
Yeah,
chances?
I think to at least touch on, at least, yeah, to bring it into to an identity idea, I think with the lack of an identity through these 5 games offensively, and there are a couple things that I'll go on to mention later about where I think they might be carving something out. But yeah, overall, there isn't anything consistent there. And with that in mind, it's hard not to immediately have questions about what the starting lineup should look like. And look, by the time some people listen over the weekend, potentially maybe a starting lineup change happened. I think one is on the horizon.
You had that post, I think today or yesterday, about Patrick Williams. I think it was yesterday. Like, if it's not time tonight, it's time very soon that Torrey Craig enters that starting lineup.
Right. I think it's time as soon as tonight. And if it doesn't happen tonight, I just think it's a mistake. I don't really know what Billy Donovan would be doing by keeping Patrick Williams in that lineup. And look, it's not, I wrote the post at BleacherNation.com. If people haven't read it, you can go find it. It should be up top, in the Bulls section, pretty, or you should be able to find it pretty easily.
Recently.
Yeah, for me, I share that online. I share it on social, and we promote it or whatever. And a lot of the comments, of course, are very negative. Of course, they're telling him that Patrick Williams should be going to the bench in the G League or for the Shanghai Sharks, like a lot of those type of comments. And that was not my intention with the post. And I even preface in there, that I think he's clearly better than his stats have reflected to begin this season. He isn't as bad as the way that he's looked. But that doesn't mean he's void of criticism, right? He 100% deserves all people to point out the stats that he's had, for people to say it's time to move him to the second unit. So for me, the decision isn't just about he hasn't been offering the first unit what they need, what has this core thrived alongside in the past. And by thrived, it's a loose term because they've never really thrived. But what have they played best with is a player like is a player like Javonte Green, is a player like Patrick Beverly. Even when they go 14-9 after they sign him, it's that more junkyard dog mentality role player who is going to be flying in to crash the offensive glass, is hustling for loose balls, just is giving you a little something extra out there just with his energy. And clearly Pat isn't that guy. And so right now, and so I think actually it would help him even more. It's not just about helping the first unit for me.
No,
it's about helping.
Street.
It's about helping Patrick Williams. And that was what that post that I wrote was largely about. I think like you said, it's a two-way street. I think it's better for Patrick Williams to go into the second unit because he's then surrounded by a lot of guys that make his life easier offensively to get into a rhythm. He might not. Someone commented because I was like, I think he should be with the second unit of junkyard dogs like Javonte Green and Alex Caruso. And people were like, why would you want him in a unit where he's the exact opposite of that? And I'm like, well, because that is
exactly,
he doesn't bring that. So someone needs to bring that for him. And in the first unit, they need that, and he's not bringing that for him. So I want him to be with that second unit next to Javon Carter, potentially next to Alex Caruso, next to Andre Drummond, like these guys that play fast, they play up tempo, they force a lot of turnovers, create easy buckets in transition. And so it allows him to focus, to think way less about the game, think way less about how can I get involved, around these big three. And instead, how can I focus, or instead, how can I just be an athlete? Just get out and, run with this group in transition. How can I just use my raw skills with this second unit? So I think it's just a better place for him overall. And I mean, that's a tangent on Patrick Williams, which I think we have to have, but it does all tie back to the identity of how, maybe you insert someone like Torrey Craig into that starting lineup, and it gives you a little bit more of what you're looking for in terms of what you want this offense to be, which is, a little more unselfish, a little more popping around. Craig's always moving off the ball and cutting. So naturally that just, that can be a domino effect. It can cause everybody else to move, because if he's cutting hard into your lane, you're going to move and cut somewhere else. So like it can all be a domino effect. And so I think that it's a lineup change that needs to happen. And these are two big stats for me when it comes to talking about an identity on the offensive end. The Bulls have talked about the things I just mentioned, which were, wanting to play fast, but also wanting to just play fast doesn't mean always playing in fast break situations, but just having quicker decisions, playing with, making
more decisive.
Sure, being more decisive with the basketball. They're averaging, they're dead last in assist percentage to start the season on the year. Now, some of that's just their offense has been pitiful. Their shot making has been horrible, but they're dead last on assist percentage to start the year. And they're also second to last in pace. So, that's you're basically your amount of possessions per game that you're getting up and down the floor. So the faster teams usually have a higher pace, the teams that are playing more up tempo. So those are two things that they want to stress, and yet they're still slow and they are still not moving the ball well enough or generating a lot of assists. And again, a lot of that just goes back to the fact that they're just shooting it very poorly. And I think that number will slowly increase just because the law of averages will come into play. Each of these guys are more efficient scorers than the year has shown. Mm-hmm. But it's been ugly. So it's just everything that they've talked about other than offensive rebounding during the offseason, I think we have yet to see on the offensive end. So they told us very clearly what they wanted their identity to be in the offseason. And it's definitely, we can easily say that we haven't seen really any of that pop up.
Yeah, it's been frustrating to watch because, again, the offensive rebounding, give it to them. That's been there. There's been more hustle on that end. There's been more production on that end. But just from an offensive standpoint, like, it's 5 games into the year and we're already and you've been on this since 2 games into the year, 3 games into the year. Like, it just feels the exact same. It's like an extension of last year. It's going to take your post on Bleacher Nation about the Pacers game of like, oh, that was cool that they won, but like, let's actually look at what happened. And what actually happened is the Pacers took a ton of threes and the Pacers didn't make a lot of those threes. So the Bulls won the game. If the Pacers make a lot more of those threes like they usually will, they're going to win those games.
Well, let's look at Dallas as an example. Yeah. They just got outscored. Dallas just got outscored.
It's funny, but
I was 4-24. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was putting together the pregame blog today, right before we started here, and I opened up the box score because I wanted to see the 3-point attempts. And like, Bulls took 33, which is a little bit low, but like better than 17, I guess. Dallas took 48 and made 20. Like, the Bulls lost by 9. Dallas took 15 more 3-pointers and made 9 more. That's the difference in the basketball game. Like,
right. Well, and what I was going to point out was the points in the paint. While the Bulls still won the points in the paint battle, 54-24.
Oh, there you
go. They won by 30. They still lost the game by 9.
It's I listen to 670 to score a lot. I put their live stream up on the TV when I'm working a lot. Mm-hmm. And Bernstein has this running joke where he does like the announcer voice, like, DeMar DeRozan, like for 2. And then like immediately it was like, and Tyrese Halliburton 3-point field goal. Like, that's just what it happens. Like, the Bulls are like, they have these slow possessions where they, like you said, pace is really slow. Like, they have these slow possessions where they play iso ball and DeMar gets one in the paint and it's awesome. And then 10 seconds later, someone on the other end is open for 3, knocking one down. You're losing that transaction by a point. And it just feels like that happens way too often. And it does happen way too often. And that's why they're an average basketball team, because they're relying on other teams to have bad nights from 3 if they're going to win the basketball game.
Right. And I just think, the idea of being an adequate 3-point shooting team at this point, I think is just, it's unrealistic. Like, I still think, but that does not mean, and some people, what they would say after the Indiana game, and what I would get frustrated with some of the fan reaction was, why even shoot threes if they aren't good at it? But that's not how it works. Like, that's just not how the NBA works. You have to still take those shots and you have to space out the defense. and you have to try your best to not counter every single 3 with a 2, because if you do that and you still win the points in the paint battle 54-24 in dominant fashion, you still could lose by 9 because it's just a math game. It's a
Dallas
numbers.
Dallas is, like you said, it's a perfect example of that. Perfect example of why you need to be able to shoot 3-pointers.
Right. And
points in the paint is an important stat. They dominate it, like you said, 30 points, and they lose the game by nearly double digits.
Yeah. And now switching that around to at least having some sort of hope offensively for an identity to form, I do think that this downhill mentality, which is what they did talk about, more drive and kick, getting into the paint. That's how you create more offensive rebounds anyway, by at least getting shots off closer to the rim, less long rebounds to worry about, all that stuff. I do think what we've seen over these last couple of games is a clear emphasis from the Bulls to just attack off the dribble and get into, the teeth of the defense, which should be a priority because they have players who can finish strong at the rim. They have LaVine, who's an efficient finisher. They have DeRozan, who's obviously an efficient finisher, and Vucevic, who actually over the past couple of years has become a lot more efficient around the rim than he even used to be. So for me, I think it's clear that it's just a little tough because this is what they were talking about, and we did see a little bit of it early on. But I think over these past few games, we've definitely seen a greater emphasis of just playing around the rim. And so Vucevic is definitely a big part of that. I'm not saying, again, that the Bulls should be playing post-up basketball with him, but just finding him for quick little turnaround, hook shots, like is always a good thing to do. But just having LaVine and DeRozan, instead of settling for jumpers, make sure they're putting their head down and getting to the rim. And the Bulls right now, if you look at it compared to the rest of the league, they are averaging the 9th most drives per game to the rim. So they are attacking, and they're starting to do that a little bit more. Their field goal percentage on those drives is, could definitely be a lot better. It's 47%. So you want to see those, since those are higher percentage looks, you want to see that number definitely closer to 50 right now after these first few games. But I think that's where it needs to be. And not only, yes, can it do what Donovan said, where you drive and you can kick it out for some potentially open threes. I'm just more about just put those shots up, just try to get shots up at the rim and try to finish strong. I think that's where they can start to form a little bit of something. And the last thing I would add to that is, you want to see more free throw attempts too, because
that's another way to get yourself to the line more too, by driving, being aggressive, and getting those shots up, because it's the NBA. And if you have Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan doing that, they're a lot more likely to get a call.
Right. It's 9th. They're only 19th right now in free throw attempts per game through 5. I definitely want to see that number increase. LaVine and DeRozan, the past 2 games in particular, have done a pretty good job combined of getting to the line. I think Coby White can lend more of a helping hand here, because he's shown, and this is why I still am okay with him being in the starting lineup, just because I think more than Javon Carter, he's shown an ability throughout his career to attack off the dribble and to at least get to the rim. So I think, I just think free throw attempts needs to be an area they stress. If I'm looking at the Dallas game, DeRozan had 6, but LaVine's only at 3. You want to see that get up, and then it was the only players to get to the line were DeRozan, LaVine, and Vucevic. DeRozan, LaVine, and Coby White. And they combined for just 11 free throw attempts. You need to find a way to get guys to the charity stripe more.
That's not good enough.
Right. And what really hurts is Patrick Williams should be one of those guys. And that's why I think he should be adding that level of physicality around the rim. And that's one of the big problems that he's had to start this year. He's just non-existent. And he took 6 field goal attempts only against Dallas, and 5 of them were from downtown. And that isn't, and he missed them all. And that isn't to say that I am not happy that he at least was showing little hesitation to shoot the 3. I'm glad he was, but it also tells you that he's just hanging out by the 3-point line. He's getting nothing off around the rim. And he definitely needs to, especially if that's what we're talking about, where this team can form an identity of just, using their athleticism to go at teams over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's just frustrating, because literally everybody could see this exact scenario coming, apparently, except for the front office. Or the front office knew that their hands were tied this offseason and they couldn't spend over the luxury, so they figured, let's run it back one more time till we have more flexibility.
Well, did you see the Max Strus comments too?
Yeah, well, you thought they'd offer him? But hey, if they
Well, I'll
offered
have
him,
that written. Yeah, if people haven't seen it, I'm gonna write it up at Bleacher Nation soon. So you can go over there and it should be up by the time people are listening. At
it's
least
not
on
like the Bulls
on
could
the
use an
podcast feeds. But
efficient 3-point shooter to go with that starting lineup, or it's not like.
well, yeah, he got. I mean, I could pull up the contract right now, but
I
Max
think it's
Strus,
like
he was
4
on.
years, 66 million or something like that
That definitely sounds right. I'm gonna pull it up right now. But
from the Cavs. It's
it
like a
was
lot of money,
62.
but
Yeah,
not
4 years,
insane money.
60. Yeah, 4 years, 62. He was on a Barstool Chicago podcast, and they were talking about. They were asking about his Chicago days, and he's a Chicago guy. He went to DePaul. He wanted to be here, and he said he obviously had a stint with Chicago right out of college, as on a 2-way contract, and tore his ACL. I believe he hung around the team to rehab. Don't quote me on that. But then the new regime took over and let him go. And that's when he ended up in Miami, and of course became a legitimate dude. And so but yeah, he was saying on that podcast that he kind of expected that Chicago would reach out with an offer this offseason, and he was looking forward to that. And while he said that there were some small negotiations and talks, like it was nothing was
Never
ever
went
going to
anywhere.
come to fruition. And why is that the case? Well, probably because they were never going to offer him 4 years and $62 million, unlike the Cavaliers did. Because what did the Bulls do instead? They got, they've settled for Torrey Craig on a veteran minimum, which we've already talked about. We love Torrey Craig. But still, it was a veteran minimum contract. And then they used half of their mid-level exception, about $6 million, on Javon Carter. So they still have, to this day, as we sit here right now, they still have about $6 million of a mid-level exception they can use. They have about $10.2 million in a disabled player exception that they could use if they wanted on someone to bring in as for Lonzo Ball. And yeah, they're not going to use that stuff because again, we sit here, I believe they are about 1.2 million, 1.7 million away from the luxury tax. So we know how this team operates, Matt.
Yeah.
They're not going to do it.
No,
that's why I even have
my tongue a little bit here.
Yeah, well, I even have a hard time to believe, if they are at the deadline, and this is why I lean more towards the idea of a blow up in general, because if they're at the deadline, if you're telling me that, let's say they're even 2 games over 500 at the around the trade deadline, which is at this point seems totally unrealistic, but let's say they are, I can't trust that they're going to invest in assets to try to, make this team better for a playoff
it'll
run.
be like last year. It'll be continuity. They'll find somebody off the scrap heap that gets similar to Patrick Beverley last year.
A buyout guy, yeah. Well, and what they'll say too is, well, we were 2 games above 500. We didn't feel like we needed anyone, and so they always have a way out. And then if they're, So I mean, that's why I think the idea in general of a blow up, it just is more likely, because you also have the DeRozan contract coming up, and they have to decide what they're going to do on that.
I really like DeMar DeRozan as a basketball player and as a human being and as a teammate. My God, they better not sign him to whatever it is that he wants. It's 4 years, and I get probably not max money, but a lot of it makes no sense. Yeah, it makes no sense for where the Chicago Bulls are.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not. For where they are currently, I would definitely have to agree with that. All right, just to end here on so identity talk. What we settle on defensively, I think there's an identity. There's and what it is just you. I think they're playing more physical than they were last year. Some of that is just the additions of Javon Carter and Torrey Craig. They're getting your face guys. They're not afraid to embrace it. Alex Caruso is that way as well. But I think Coby White has adapted that mentality, even though he might not be a great defender. He's somebody who isn't afraid to puff his chest out anymore. And Patrick Williams, everyone say what you will about him, still a very solid defender. And that side of the ball is not a problem. So I will say this, and then people will stitch together when Tyrese Halliburton blows by him. And there's been some bad moments because he's in his head. But overall, if he does have any good things to his name at this moment, it's him defensively. So
agreed.
I definitely think there are moments where this team has shown that they are a viable defense. They can force turnovers and they can rebound decently well. So there's stuff forming there. Offensively, probably still nothing, and there won't be until I think we talk about it, a starting lineup change. and they're not checking the boxes that they wanted to check this offseason. So unless they maybe start just being a team that is trying to beat guys off the dribble over and over again and really attack the paint, it's hard to see a legitimate identity forming here. And it's hard to see them reaching that quick decision-making offense, running up and down the floor style that they want. So that's where we settle on that. And then what I want to end on is here are your stats 5 games in, some of the key advanced stats. Offensive rating, the Chicago Bulls are 25th in offensive rating, 105.6. Defensive rating, the Chicago Bulls are 21st, 112.8. So bottom 10, both offense and defense. We already talked about assist percentage.
Sick.
That's 30th. We talked about pace. That's 29th. Effective field goal percentage, they sit at... Oh, I was on the wrong thing. I was like, what? There's no way they're that high. Effective field goal percentage, they're 29th. That's a major concern considering that's the one thing they had going for them last year is at least individually, all these players were hitting their shots and being efficient. So that at least bumped their efficient field goal percentage way up. This year, it's been way down. DeMar DeRozan, a big reason for that. He's only shooting like 43% to start the year. It should change, but still, now your 3 guys were the one thing they could at least say about themselves was on an individual level, they were at least performing efficiently. That's not happening now. And the good stuff would be offensive rebounding percentage. They're top 15 in the league. So that's at least above, they're right around average, above average, which after last year where they were almost dead last is a big change. And then turnover percentage, they continue to force turnovers at a pretty high rate. They also continue to keep their turnovers down. They're only turning the ball over about 5 or about 12 times per game. So that's fifth best in the league. So they take care of the ball. They're not shooting themselves in the foot, which is good. They just can't shoot anything in the direction. Okay, I just wanted to end with rattling off some stats so you could really leave this show chipper. And you
have a great Friday. That's a great way to kick off my weekend.
So you can leave motivated. Yeah. The Brooklyn Nets will be hours away from us recording this. And then
Friday night, Bulls Nets at the United Center.
And then we didn't mention on the show, and we should have, but then tomorrow night, the Bulls get the Denver Nuggets in Denver. So.
Great travel weekend here. Go from Dallas back to Chicago, back out to Denver.
And now you get to go play, Jokic on
tired legs for the champs who are playing unbelievably good.
Oh, I forgot.
Here.
Before we leave, I did say on Twitter that I would answer any questions that anybody had. Shockingly, Friday in the middle of Friday afternoon, we barely got anything, but we did get a question here that said, I don't really know if it was a question, but it was a comment, and I said I'd read this. So
sure.
This was, I'd say they have an identity very similar to last year. Decent, about 500 team that isn't close to a championship. That's fair. That's what we basically said on this podcast. So
that's right.
Your identity. This guy said that playing against Detroit and Luka, you see the difference that Lonzo made, yet somehow the Bulls are unable to find anyone that can play point guard. Let's just go with Kobe is what he said. That was from Johnny on Twitter. Yeah, we kind of brought that up too. Like,
I love Kobe. Like, I really do like Kobe White, and this is not a knock on Kobe White. I just don't think he fits with this big 3.
Yeah,
I don't think he's the right point guard for this big 3, and that's okay. But again, they don't really. I don't know if they don't care.
You need a very true facilitator.
Yeah, you need a floor general.
Lonzo's not even. Yeah, it's hard because Lonzo. He wasn't even the truest of true point guards. He. In New Orleans, he was playing at the wing. He wasn't even playing point guard, but he. He at least would do what you wanted him to do in transition. And don't get me wrong, very gifted passer, but Lonzo is not a super strong half court pick and roll playmaker type because he wasn't really a threat to ever score on ball. In the half court, but he was just a very cerebral, know where guys need the ball kind of player, and also was always just focused on facilitating. Whereas someone like Kobe, and no one can blame him. He is a scorer at heart, and that's what he came into the league doing. So it's hard to ever believe that he can go out there and just focus strictly on setting everybody up. Yeah, but I do still think Kobe's the right option for now. I will say maybe when we come back to you on Monday or whatever after 2 more games, I'm ready for Javon Carter. But I would say I'm okay with Kobe. Stick with it for now. He's had a couple of good games. The first two were good. He's also had little moments where he's still playing hard. But
he's always playing hard. That's never the issue for me. It's just it feels like they're
yeah.
asking him to do something that like I'm very big on coaches and front office putting players like the mark of a good coach and a good front office is putting your players in the best position they can to succeed. Like put your players in the best position to get the most out of them, to give them the most success. And I don't think they've done that with Kobe White.
It's possible. They're not doing it right now with Patrick Williams. That's what needs to change.
We can both agree on that. Very, very much so.
All right, that's all we're gonna do for now. A little bit of a messy show, but the Bulls are a mess, so there's nothing we can really do right now.
Maybe they can just win win tonight, so at least next week we don't have to be like they're not gonna beat the Nuggets. That's fine. Like we can get
we
over
already
that
can
one.
accept
But,
that moving forward.
Win tonight,
Yeah.
so at least it's a shorthanded Nets team. They're banged up. Ben Simmons is like their best. Just beat them, please, tonight. Don't make this harder than it has to be.
Good news though, at least the Nuggets also play tonight, so it's a back end of a back-to-back for both teams.
There we go.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. As always, you can go read our content over at BleacherNation.com. Otherwise, you can follow Points of the Podcast on Apple or Spotify, or I think anywhere you get your podcast, basically. But then go to YouTube as well. BetSports Media on YouTube is where you can
get to see our beautiful faces.
Our beautiful face, and we live stream this show. You could also watch live stream on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at BN_Bulls. So that's all we got for you this week. We will be back next week to cry a little bit more about this Chicago Bulls basketball team. Thank you.